What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here with a new daily video. All of the stories therein are new to this channel as well as I can keep track of. So if you guys end up enjoying this video and you guys are enjoying these daily videos, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. It really helps the video to do well and ensures I can keep making these videos daily for a long time to come. If you guys have any thoughts you'd like to share in the comments, either about the stories or the video itself, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite parts about doing this is reading your guys' comments, even if I may not always be able to respond to them. Either way, I'm gonna let you guys enjoy the next hour or so of true scary stories, and I'll see you again at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. I, 30 and female, used to live in a small neighborhood from ages 13 to 18. This took place when I was around 15 or so. I spent most of my time just walking around the neighborhood, listening to my MP3 player. Sheesh, I feel old just typing that. There was a guy around the same age as me that lived maybe 5 or so houses down from me. From neighborhood gossip, I learned that he was homeschooled and had been in and out of juvie multiple times due to anger issues. He was almost always outside, and sometimes when I passed by his house he would start following me. I was always smart enough to have my music down low enough to be able to hear and be aware of my surroundings. At first, I just passed it off as him ending up taking a walk at the same time of day I did. Looking back, that was truly dumb. As time passed by, he got closer and closer to me when following, until he eventually decided to come up right behind me. He said some truly heinous things that I will not repeat here. He was basically right in my ear whispering. I ran home immediately and told my sister, who basically had raised me as her own. She told me I was lying and to stop making up stories. For a while, I stopped going out walking unless I needed fresh air and exercise. I tried going regularly again after maybe 2 months or so. Sure enough, there he was. He came up right behind me and started to say those awful things again. I turned up my music and ignored him. This is what I continued to do every day until he eventually got tired of me ignoring him, I guess. One day he grabbed my arm, and I couldn't get away. He then grabbed the back of my neck and told me I should know better than to ignore him. Again, I tried telling my sister, but she still didn't believe me. I stopped going out once again. 2 weeks later, I woke up to some loud banging on my bedroom wall. There was a garage on both sides of the house, and the wall of my bedroom shared a wall with one of the garages. The garage was unfinished. There wasn't even concrete down. It was easily accessible from outside, as it was missing the door at the back of the house. My sister was out of town, and my dad was deaf and bedridden. It was just me in the house able to do anything. My bedroom also had a door to go outside, so I ran over and made sure it was locked. I laid down and waited for the banging to stop, but it didn't. My cousin and her boyfriend lived just down the street, so I called her up. She sent her boyfriend down to see what was going on. Her boyfriend pulled right into the backyard and right up to the door of the garage. His headlights filled the garage with light and outran the guy from down the street, holding a large knife. He took off running, and my cousin's boyfriend followed close behind. It was at this time I called the police. They came and took a statement, but they said there was nothing they could do because other than going into the garage and trespassing, he hadn't technically done anything. I never took a walk in that neighborhood again. I still wonder how he knew what wall to bang on. How did he know I was right on the other side of it? How did he know my sister was gone, or that my dad was bedridden inside and couldn't do anything? I never usually locked that door, so had he been in my house to know? What would have happened if I would have gone outside? It still gives me the creeps. Hello everyone, my name is Jade and I'm 21 years old. I'm going to tell you a story that happened in 2017, back when I was 16 years old. I went on a vacation with my little sister Alice and her best friend Tia, both 14 years old. Like every summer, we usually go to Karnak, a town in Brittany, where we stay in the same residence each time. It belonged to a friend of our father. The residence in question is made up of several small houses with a shared swimming pool. There's no pedestrian entrance to the residence. In other words, the entrance for cars and pedestrians is the same. And since there's no badge or anything, the residence is constantly open to facilitate passage. The gardens of the houses are also designed in the same way. They're not closed and anyone can pass through their neighbor's garden. Something which is done quite often, and which shocks no one really. Our house is right next to a driveway, and really close to the pool, which increases the chance of people passing through or by our garden. This misadventure began at the beach. We wouldn't know until a few days later, because at the time we didn't really pay attention to what was happening. With Alice and Tia, we always did everything together. And as the beach was less than 5 minutes away and the city center less than 10, we were never accompanied by adults and had a certain amount of freedom. It was right in the middle of a conversation between us girls on the beach when I received an airdrop. I could see a photo of someone's feet. At first, I didn't pay attention at all to the name that airdropped me. I found it funny and decided to accept the photo. The photo was a picture of someone's feet in the sand, with writing that said, "You're going to die." I laughed and leaned towards Alice and Tia. Haha, very funny. At the time, we didn't really understand the joke, so we skipped over it and continued our conversation normally. Nothing unusual happened thereafter, until the following afternoon. We went to the beach again and received that same photo of someone's feet, with the words, "You're going to die." The joke no longer made me laugh, and I told Alice and Tia to stop doing this, because it was funny once but not twice. This was the first time I actually showed them the photo. They looked shocked and said it wasn't them who'd airdropped it. I didn't believe them. We returned home and the evening came. All three of us sleep in the same room, by the way. I usually go to bed later than the other two, because I watch movies until late at night on my phone. While the girls were sleeping, I was interrupted in my film by an airdrop request. I then had two thoughts. The first thought was that now that I was looking at the name of the iPhone that sent me the photo, it was quite strange. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was an assembly of letters and symbols that didn't really mean anything. The second was that since Tia and Alice were already asleep, it wasn't possible it was them. At this point, I started to panic, because that meant that from the beginning, an outside person had been sending me airdrops and had now followed us to our house. I decided to wake the girls up and let them know something was going on. We were stressed together, but too scared to check to see if anyone was outside. The rest of the night passed, and several days went by without anything further happening. We thought it was a bad joke from some children in the residence and quickly forgot about this happening. A week later, the day before our departure, we decided to visit the abandoned house which was located a stone's throw away from ours, just to mark the occasion before leaving. Our mother had strictly forbidden us from going to this place because she had clearly seen our look when we saw the house a few days earlier. Abandoned house means a house that's not maintained, and therefore there are many risks, such as the floor collapsing. We were young and didn't care. All we wanted was to have a little scare and some fun. I would like to point out that we had all really forgotten this airdrop story, because since the one sent to the room, I had not received anything further. We arrived at the forbidden abode and entered the home. The door must have already been forced open by someone before, because it was easily opened. We decided to sneak out during the night. An abandoned house must be visited during the evening to make it scarier after all. Once we got inside, we got the feeling a horror film could really be made inside this house. There were debris everywhere, lots of dust, graffiti on the walls, the wood was creaking ominously. We had our dose of stress, and we scared ourselves. At some point though, we heard a noise that didn't sound at all like cracking wood, or a noise you might hear in an old home. The noise was a shrill noise, kind of like the sound of metal scraping against something. We started to look for where the noise was coming from, but with no success. In the next moment, we received a request for an airdrop. We immediately noticed the name of that same iPhone that had sent me those ones a week earlier. This time though, the picture was not a photo of someone's feet in the sand. We decided not to accept the airdrop, but we could still see part of the photo sent. Even if the photo was dark, we could see ourselves inside the house. The photo appeared to be taken from outside, only a few feet away. At this point, we really started to panic. We said to ourselves that maybe this person really was serious. Maybe they were going to hurt us. We automatically moved toward the window where the photo was seen to be taken from. We could see a shadow outside, which was located almost perfectly from where the noise seemed to be coming from. We wondered what was going on and stood there looking at this thing for a few minutes. It was so dark though that we couldn't really see well. Suddenly the silhouette changed shape. It was indeed a man, now getting up from what seemed to be a crouching position with what seemed to be a knife. He was scraping it against the post next to him. That was the source of the noise. We were sure now it was this stranger who had been sending us the airdrops all along because there was no one else around. It didn't stop there though. He suddenly began to run at us. At this precise moment, we decided to quickly flee from the house. We knew that if we came face to face with this stranger, something bad was going to happen. Luckily, the back door was also open. We wouldn't have had time to run away and escape from the man if we'd had to go through the front door. We ran with all our strength, without looking back, and we arrived at the residence. Once we arrived, we noticed that we could no longer hear the stranger following us, but we did hear a laugh quite far away from us, which really made us shiver. He was stopped in the middle of the road. He pointed at us and laughed, then turned around and left. We hurried back into the house, and we finally realized what just happened. We said to ourselves that we'd likely just escaped the worst-case scenario. We never told our parents our story. We were forbidden from going into the house, and we were afraid of the repercussions. The same goes for the police. We knew full well we had no right to go into this house which was not our property, and therefore we kept silent in fear of getting in trouble. That night we didn't sleep until early in the morning. Since then, I've left my airdrop to contacts only. I get a strange feeling still whenever I receive one from one of my friends. After thinking about it, we think this person must have been following us for a while, since he'd probably managed to hear our first names in the conversation to be able to send it to me each time in person. So I've been a huge fan of these types of stories for years now, and finally have a fitting one of my own. For a quick bit of backstory, myself, my brother, and disabled mother all live together in a trailer about 30 minutes from Nashville, Tennessee. I was wary of moving there at first, for the stereotypes you may hear about trailer parks. Luckily though, it was not nearly as bad as we'd been led to believe. We had zero issues in the last 10 years we've been here. All the neighbors are very nice, well-kept yards, everything else is okay. On to the story though. About a week ago, we were finally putting up our Christmas tree, drinking probably a little bit too much beer, and listening to Christmas music. The Christmas spirit was really in full swing. During our random banter though, my brother suddenly said, "Oh yeah, I can't believe I forgot to tell you. Earlier today at work, the owner had to kick out some guy who was acting really creepy." My brother works as the stalker at a family-owned little market about a mile from our home. He went on to tell me this younger-looking guy was pacing the aisles, sometimes standing still for minutes, and not responding whenever anyone would ask if he needed help finding something. After about 20 minutes of this suspicious behavior, the owner finally asked him to just leave because he was scaring the other customers. Without a single word, the man left. We continued with our good time, hanging ornaments, drinking, getting our mom involved. It was all good. We wrapped up at around 10:30 and helped our mom to bed. We decided we might as well finish off the ton of beer we had left and admire our fully decked out Christmas tree. Around 11:30, we decided to go out on the front porch to share a cigarette, as we usually did when we had a good buzz going. My brother opened the door and almost immediately shut it back closed. I asked him what was wrong. "Holy shit, that guy was just telling you about? He just walked down the street." He was out walking right past our house. I thought that was pretty strange, but I wasn't really that concerned. We waited for a few minutes to see if we'd see him again, but when he didn't appear, we went outside and smoked as usual. We went back inside after we were done. My brother and I aren't troublemakers at all, but I am pretty confident in our ability to defend ourselves if we had to. At this point, these were just thoughts in the back of my mind though. After all, I hadn't even seen the guy yet, and he didn't seem to be sticking around. Fast forward to about 2 a.m. We were more than drunk enough to go ahead and call in the night. After one more cigarette, my brother opened the door. Immediately, I could hear him saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hey man, you good? Hey buddy, what's up, you good?" I was in the kitchen at the time, but quickly decided something didn't sound right. I rushed over to the door, and what I saw when I got to it was a younger man standing on our deck. He was pretty tall, about 6'4". I was realizing for the first time this must be the guy he'd been talking about. One thing my brother must not have gotten close enough to notice at work earlier, though, was this guy's eyes. I'm not exaggerating when I say I've never seen anything like it. His body language wasn't super menacing or anything, but his eyes were the strangest combination of wide-eyed bewilderment and pure fury, like us opening our door confused him and also made him extremely angry. I joined my brother in explaining to him that it's late and he should head home. After what I'd said, there was about 30 seconds of the man just staring. He walked off without a word. I peeked out our blinds to make sure he'd really left, and I couldn't see him anywhere. It was like he'd almost disappeared. We were joking and saying things like, "Well, that was pretty weird, huh?" It took a while for my adrenaline to calm down. I kept thinking to myself that what really bothered me was those 30 seconds of the man staring. It felt like he was deciding on what his next move should be, but what that could have been, I have no idea. I also didn't love that my brother said when he opened the door, the man had already been silently standing there. For how long, who can know? We calmed down by watching YouTube videos. After another 30 minutes or so, I finally said to my brother, "Okay man, let's just go to bed. I'll take one more look outside to be safe." I felt like it wasn't really necessary, but I opened the door anyway. To my surprise, the man was back. The streetlights are spaced very far apart in our trailer park, but at the very edge of our driveway, I could see his silhouette about 50 feet away, just staring at our front door. I should mention he's not there texting or on the phone with someone or doing anything else. He's just there standing and staring. I do feel a little bad in hindsight, because I'm sure this poor guy had some serious mental issues occurring. But between being drunk and exhausted and the furious looks he was giving us, I was over it. I put some bass in my voice. "Hey man, you can't just keep coming back to our driveway. You're being creepy. Just leave us alone." I didn't really want to call the cops on him. His demeanor didn't change at all. But the second I mentioned the word cops, that seemed to do the trick. He turned around and walked away. I hope we handled it well. I understand and empathize with people with mental health problems, and I have family and friends who unfortunately suffer from such things. However, I can't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen that night. He'd never actually left our porch earlier. He didn't leave the porch earlier that night until I showed up to the door, essentially making him outnumbered, and even then he still came back. I hope he's okay out there. We haven't seen the guy since. I also hope not calling the police wasn't a bad choice, and he isn't out there with bad intentions on someone else's front porch at 2 a.m. I wish I could figure out what that was all about, but during every interaction my brother and I had with him that day and night, he never spoke a single word. I used to have a Costco membership, but I had to cancel it after what was one of the most creepy experiences of my life. It started last summer. I would shop at Costco every single week. I had a routine that I would go every Saturday morning and buy all of my items for the week ahead. I would usually get most of the same items. Most of it was food and things like that. It would usually take me less than 30 minutes to get it all done. The membership saved me a lot of money because I used it so frequently. Plus, there was a Costco just over 5 minutes away from my house. One time, I went to Costco like any other day, then returned back home. Everything was fine when later in the day I got the mail. I lived in a small but nice house in a pretty typical neighborhood. When I retrieved my mail, most of it was just bills and advertisements, but I had this one letter that really stood out from the rest. It was typed but seemed like an actual letter. It wasn't professional looking or anything, and there was no return address either. It didn't say who it was from. It did say, "Please read." When I opened it up, it was a typed out letter on one piece of paper, directly to me. "Hi there. You're such a beautiful woman. I love watching you shop every week at Costco. I'm writing you this because I want to meet you sometime soon." After I read this, I thought to myself, is somebody stalking me, or is this just a joke? I didn't really know what to think. I had never noticed anybody following me around Costco or anything. I never went when it was all that busy either, so I thought I would have easily noticed if someone was. Usually it would be around 10 a.m. or so, when the store was still really quiet. I considered not going to Costco the next week. Ultimately, though, I chose to go. I wanted to save money, and I figured that it was not really that serious. The next Saturday came, and I went back to Costco at my usual time. It opened at 9:30, and I would get there at about 10 and be done by 10:30. I started doing all my normal shopping, going down all the aisles I typically did, getting all the products I usually did. I was careful to pay attention if someone was following me or not, but I didn't notice anyone suspicious around. About halfway through, I was in one of the aisles toward the back of the store. On each side of the aisle were lots of pallets on the ground. There would be products on the pallets that you could buy. If you've never been to Costco before, you can buy things in bulk, and the store is kind of like a giant warehouse. Most of the products are not displayed the way they are at Target or Walmart or something like that. I was shopping when, for whatever reason, I found my vision drawn to the right, where these pallets of products were. Behind a stack of pallets, I saw a man hiding back there. He was far back and hidden really well. He was also staring right at me. When I saw him, he immediately ducked down out of sight. I walked away and immediately went to the checkout. This guy had to be the one who'd written me that letter. I did not get a great look at him, but he seemed to be in his 20s and had darker hair. When I got to the checkout, I told the employee at the register about him. She said she would talk to her manager about it. I just wanted to leave though. I figured the guy would probably leave or hide before they got there anyway. I left, and the same day I canceled my Costco membership. There was no way I could go back there. This really creeped me out because apparently, unbeknownst to me, some guy had been watching me every time I shopped. I had no idea because he was hiding in the aisles behind pallets. It must have been just about every time. Later that night, I was at home by myself and got a knock at the door at about 8 p.m. or so. I got up and went to the window. I looked outside and it was the very same guy who had been hiding in the Costco. My heart started racing. He knocked again after I didn't answer the door right away. I stayed in the living room. I just wanted him to leave. After about 5 minutes, he knocked once more. I was still not going to answer. I stayed where I was, and after a little while, I thought he'd finally left. That was until I heard a knock coming from the back side of my house. He was now at the back door. This was creeping me out too much. I called the police on him. He wasn't trying to break in, but he was certainly trying very hard to get me to answer. I didn't know what he was going to do if I continued to ignore him for a long time. I think then he actually left though. When the police got there, they looked around outside and couldn't find the guy anywhere. They said if he came back for me to not hesitate to call. For the rest of the night though, he didn't try anything else. I didn't see him for several days and was not going back to Costco either. Later that week, I got another letter from him. This letter was a little bit longer than the first one. It said that he was disappointed I didn't want to talk to him, and even more disappointed that I'd called the police on him. He then said that he was sorry, and he was not going to bother me anymore. I was actually really surprised to read that. The crazy thing is that after that letter, I really haven't seen from him or heard from him ever since. It's amazing how he just stopped. After going to such great lengths. I mean, he found out where I lived, he watched me while hiding inside of Costco. I guess he had enough common sense to know that if I got the police involved, he might get in some serious trouble, and it meant he was really scaring me. Either way, I'm glad I haven't seen him since, and I hope I never see him ever again. This happened to me when I was at elementary school. It would usually take me about 30 minutes to walk home from school. On the way home, there were 2 sets of traffic lights on a big 2-lane road. My school was by the seaside. I loved it. I used to walk in a group of close friends of about 3 or 4 of us, and we used to chat about all the latest fads, fashion, homework, that sort of thing. It was a really fun time for me when I think back on it. It was summertime in my 3rd year of elementary school. As usual, I was waiting for my friends outside on the playground after school had finished. I noticed an old man in a white car kind of eyeing me through his open window. At first, I thought he was someone's child because he was so short and petite. He was also sunken back in his seat, so I could barely see him. Not to mention, he had this baseball cap pulled down just over his eyes. I remember the logo that was on his cap. His skin was slightly sunburned too. On a second glance, he looked to be about 40 to 50 years old. The man fully rolled down his window and leaned over the passenger seat. He called out to me, "Hey, I'm sorry to tell you, but your dad's been involved in a big accident. He was rushed to the hospital. I'm one of your dad's friends, and I'm here to take you to go see him." Of course, when you hear something that terrible, it's gonna shock you. I had never seen this old man before, though. When you're younger and an adult tells you to get in a car, you listen, right? Especially when they say something like that. I didn't know what to do. What was I supposed to do right now? My legs were frozen still. It was at this point one of my friends came around the corner, and I began to tell her about what I'd just heard from this old man in the car. Our conversation was interrupted. "Hurry up, your dad's waiting for you." The old man in the white car seemed to be getting very impatient. He said once again my dad had asked him to come and get me. These words really upset me. I didn't know this man, but I was so worried about my dad. I was so confused. Something in my gut was telling me this was a very dangerous situation. This standoff between us and the old man in the car went on for about 10 minutes. It was agonizing until he finally got fed up. "Fine, don't get in. I hope your dad forgives you if he doesn't die." He rolled up the window and started the car. He drove off, and I watched that car driving away. I had conflicting feelings of guilt for not accepting the ride with him to see my father in the hospital. Yet most strongly, I felt it would not have been safe to do so. After a while, my friend and I decided to head home as usual. I was nervous all the way back. As we walked along the seafront, I got home and spoke to my mother about what just happened. She confirmed that the old man was a liar. She reported the incident to my school and to the police. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I'm so glad you didn't get in that man's car." The next day at school, all the students were gathered and given a warning about this strange old man. They were told about what happened to me. The teacher explained that if we saw an older man wearing a cap in a white car, that we had to tell a teacher or a family member immediately. Do not believe anything the man said and get away from him as fast as possible. I found out at a later date that a child had actually gone missing at a school not too far away from ours, and the child's whereabouts are unknown. It was said the child had been tricked into getting into a stranger's car, and the police were currently conducting an investigation. I don't know how that case ended, but I pray the child was returned safely, and the perpetrator was put away for a long time. I wonder what would have happened to me if I had gotten into that car. I'm much older now, but I do think about this often, and when I do, I always break out in goosebumps. A few weeks ago, I went on a trip where I'd rented out an Airbnb townhouse. I was staying in a small town that was near some trails that I really wanted to hike. I'd never been there before, nor did I really have any idea of the place I was staying at. I just knew it was a relatively small town that was in a convenient area for me to drive. The way down there took 9 hours in total, so by the time I got to the Airbnb, it was getting quite late. It was on a street that had multiple other townhouses on it, but once I found it, I parked on the road and got my things up to the door. The place looked decent on the outside. Definitely not new or anything, but nothing that I wasn't already expecting. I texted the owner to let them know I'd made it, since I didn't see a passcode to the door anywhere in my emails. I waited for a couple of minutes, just kind of standing there and looking out at the street. I heard a door open nearby, and a man walked around the corner with this big smile on his face. He greeted me as the Airbnb host, and then let me into the place. He said he'd be right next door if I needed anything. I wasn't expecting that, but at least he left quickly and didn't make anything too weird. I set my things up in the bedroom and had a look around the house. I went to bed soon after. The next day, I ate a quick breakfast, then drove out to a trail and hiked it for a good 4 hours or so. I got back to the townhouse at 7 p.m., but when I entered this time, something felt different. Some of the things in my room were off, like they'd been moved slightly, almost imperceptible. Nothing that I know of was missing. But I don't know, I just had a feeling it had been tampered with. Aside from my unevidenced suspicions, though, there wasn't really anything suspicious to prove anyone had been inside while I was gone. After looking around for 30 minutes, I was more sure that this was just me being nervous about staying in an unfamiliar area. I forgot about it and heated up a frozen meal, then ate dinner on the couch. At around 11 p.m., I went to bed. This was a single-story townhouse, so the bedroom was at the end of the main hallway, just opposite the front door. I was always used to sleeping upstairs, so it was a little hard to get comfortable as I laid there in bed and tried to fall asleep. I kept drifting off for a few minutes, then waking up again and repeating this process. Maybe an hour into the night, I was laying there awake waiting to go back asleep when I heard a sound from outside the room. It sounded like a door softly creaking open from across the house. It sounded intentional, like they were trying to open it as quietly as possible. I sat up in my bed and looked at the door. I listened in, but I didn't hear anything else. After a minute, I got up and went to the bedroom door, cracking it open just enough to see through down the hallway. I could see the dim glow of the porch light lighting up the area where the front door was. That indicated to me that the front door was now partially open. I carefully and quietly closed my door, then locked it and moved to the back of the room. I called the police as well. In the middle of the phone call, I heard a creak right outside the bedroom door. When I looked at the bottom, I could see the outline of a shadow of someone standing there. I immediately stopped talking, waiting for them to walk away before continuing to report to the operator. Thankfully, nothing else seemed to happen. I waited for the officers to get there, but the person was already long gone by then. Everything showed that someone had been inside, including shoe prints all over the place. There was no doubt, even to the cops. For some reason, I had my mind set on it being that Airbnb host. They didn't find anything to support that, other than the front door having been opened without any struggle. There's also not much to say on whether they'd been inside the house while I was gone during the day. At least, not with nothing missing. Since they came back only once I was there, I think their intentions must have had something to do with me. It still haunts my thoughts, wondering what could have happened, and if that person is out there still trying. My name is Daryl. Many years ago, I used to work night shift at a hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Mostly just families and stuff. We had on-site security then too. However, in the off-season during the winter months, it was a completely different story. The cheap weekly rates that we'd offer attracted a lot of creepy people. The idea was supposed to make money in the off-season by renting to what's known as snowbirds, old retired people who come to the beach for a month or more throughout the winter. It didn't always work out that way though. The cheap rates made it possible for less than desirable elements to become long-term residents. I discovered more than my fair share of meth labs, broken up physical assaults, and done much more during the winter months working third shift. I would meet some interesting people quite often. The cold weather would mean some homeless people would come in and try to get warm and grab a cup of free coffee. I wasn't technically supposed to let them, but it's not in me to be cruel. I would let them grab a cup of coffee and get warm for a minute, as long as they didn't attempt to cause any trouble. As you can see, the night shift in winter made for some crazy and sometimes creepy stories. I have quite a lot, but this one stands out the most to me because it didn't end well for me. I had a great night up till this point. I had gone up to an indie wrestling show with my best friend before work. In fact, I had agreed to come in an hour early the next night for the young lady that worked the second shift, in exchange for her working an hour late from me on this night, so I could enjoy the wrestling show. Ironically enough, I even met Terry Funk that night, a wrestling legend known for his hardcore and bloody matches. Little did I know I was about to experience that kind of violence for real. I was supposed to be there at midnight, due to her working over an hour for me. I normally came in at 11 p.m. I counted the register and she briefed me on her night shift as to what had happened, per usual. As she was leaving, my friend who we'll call Andrew pulled up. He worked second shift maintenance at this hotel, and 2 other hotels our company owned. He would regularly stop by after work and go grab us some food. We would play World of Warcraft on our laptops after eating. Business was usually slow enough for this to happen. He was just getting my money in order to order food and getting ready to leave.
I was excitedly telling him about how much fun I'd had during the wrestling show, and I was showing him my Terry Funk t-shirt that I was so proud of. I was walking into the back office to put the shirt up when I heard the doorbell indicating a customer had entered. I turned around when I heard someone say something loudly. I still couldn't make out what they had said. I just reached the doorway when I saw Andrew just fall down in front of me. The next thing I know, a guy walks around the corner and hits me in the head with a short steel pipe in his hand. It staggered me, and I went to one knee. The next thing I know, he was hitting me in the head with the pipe over and over. I heard another guy who I hadn't noticed at this moment say, "He got away and got a cop." They left out the door. I was finally able to get to my feet. I tried to call the police from the phone in the back office, but I was having issues. I slammed it in frustration. I was really hurting, and I was scared. I was freaking out. I realized they could come back at any moment. I ran and locked the door. I didn't know where Andrew had gone, and that worried me. I called 911. About this time, blood had started pouring down my head. I told the operator I'd been attacked, and I needed an officer and an ambulance right away. I then called the other hotel we ran to let the night manager named Travis, who watched over all 3 properties, know what happened. He thought I was messing with him at first, because when we get bored, we would often prank each other. I finally convinced him I wasn't joking. He was going to lock up and calm down. The cops and the ambulance pulled up, and I opened the door. It was at this time I found out that after they'd sucker punched him and knocked him down, Andrew was able to jump over the desk and escape, just as a cop was driving by. I ended up in the hospital ER, where I had to have 10 staples in my scalp. They gave me morphine for the pain. I had no way to get home after being treated, but the doctors and nurses took pity on me and paid for a cab. My plan was to just go back to work, because this was December and Christmas was coming. I had 3 kids, and I needed all the hours I could get. When I got back to the hotel, this guy Ted was there with his wife Barbara, who also worked at the front desk. She was shocked to see me. She thought I would still be in the hospital. I thought that I'd only been hit once in the head after being punched, but the video which Ted was pulling for the police showed a different story. After I went to one knee, the guy had hit me not just 1 time in the head, but instead a total of 10 times. I kept trying to grab the pipe and get up for some reason. I don't remember that. I guess I was really out of it. He kept punching me and hitting me with the pipe until his friends told him that Andrew had gotten away. That's when the 2 of them ran out. I was given a room at the other hotel we own, and Ted and Barbara gave me a lift there. I was in no condition to drive. They gave me a paid week off to heal. They then switched me to the other hotel on night shift for about a month, just in case these guys were after me in particular. We never found out why they chose to attack me.
My name is Janelle. I'm a 21-year-old French girl and a student in France. Tired of not finding true love, I decided to lose my virginity with my best friend. In them, I found a pretty fantastic sex friend with whom I got along wonderfully on all levels for about 3 months. That was around the time they threw me aside because I'm still in love with my ex. I was so fragile at the time that I made my first suicide attempt. I went to the emergency room and then the mental hospital. For the smart amongst you out there, you'll probably have guessed that I was already in a depression for a few months after, under treatments as well, with a strong penchant for alcohol on the side. To complete this auto-destruction mechanism, what better than reaching out on some dating apps? A few weeks after my release from the mental hospital, I matched up to make some new encounters and forget about my dear and ex-best friend. I always met guys at home for a first date because I have 0 experience with this kind of thing, and that's what I did for all of my normal dates. On one fine day, it came a time when I matched with a guy who we'll call Matthew.
Matthew was not the most beautiful and had more than a few extra pounds, but I'm not exactly Beyonce myself, so hey, why judge? I matched since we had similar tastes, especially his hobbies and the fact he liked to smoke weed. So I thought to myself, hey, perfect. Why not smoke some joints between having sex and doing our hobbies? He gave me some personal information like his address, his job, things going on in his life. He told me he'd just recently gotten fired. Work or no work though, I didn't really care. I simply explained to him that I was in quite a fragile state and I'd just come out of a mental clinic being very depressed. All for the purpose of making him understand that I might not be at my best. I also told him I was not looking for something very complicated. He assured me that was exactly what he was looking for as well, and he actually preferred to just be very cuddly. Perfect. After only 1 or 2 days of discussion, we agreed to set a date, a mojito party at my house, and he'd bring along some joints. When he arrived, he was even worse than in his photos. He was completely dirty and had extremely greasy hair and was wearing a stained t-shirt as well, the style of a teenager living with their mom, despite being at least 26 years old. I was far from wetting my panties, but I desperately needed some company. I offered to make him some drinks while I chose a film on television. Instead, though, he ran into the kitchen to prepare 2 mojitos before joining me on the sofa. We talked a bit, and he was not really that smart or interesting either. I downed my drink, hoping to animate the party with that alone. After that, it was a 3-day blackout. According to our dear Matthew, I had that drink, then we smoked while watching a film before going into the bedroom. I can vaguely remember being on the bed and seeing him dressed above me, looking at me before turning his heels and slamming the door. I remember my phone going off constantly. I was away from a work group appointment at the time, so my friends were worried and kept on calling me. They couldn't contact me the entire time, so they contacted my sister. None of them could get through. Eventually, they got so worried they rushed to my house and rang again and again. Still no answer, so they called the firemen who managed to open the bottom door, but not the door to my apartment. They kept on knocking, calling me, and eventually I ended up opening the door. The firemen concluded I was hungover and left while my friends helped me get dressed. They also thought I drank too much. They noticed, though, that my body was now covered with yellow betadine marks on my arms, legs, stomach, etc. They took my cat and took me back to one of their houses since I was in an almost comatose state. I was having trouble speaking. I looked almost completely elsewhere. I seemed to have a lot of trouble conceptualizing as well. The next day, my sister came to pick me up so I could stay with her for a few days. Everyone was convinced I'd just tried to kill myself with drugs and alcohol. At about that time, though, I started having a pain in my private area and a lot of blood loss as well. My sister took me to the hospital. I explained to them that I had to report I may have had unprotected sex while unconscious. I was advised to file a complaint, and I was redirected to the OB emergency. The next day, I finally snapped back to fully awake. My relatives could see it right away. I was much more lively, my remarks were more consistent. I got swabs done and a bunch of tests as well. Over the course of a week, I made a series of appointments for blood samples, urine samples, etc. I went on to file a complaint with the testimony of my friends, who met me at home, and my sister who took care of me the entire time. After talking about it to people my age, older people, but especially medical staff and the police, the term organ trafficking was mentioned more than once. Apparently that guy Matthew was suspected of it. They think he must have chickened out because he actually liked me at the last minute or something. Despite my complaint, my bed full of betadine, my underwear torn off, and the blood on the doors of my apartment, which I'm not even sure how that got there, my attacker got nothing, and I'll never know what really happened during those 3 days. I'd like to point out that I did used to drink and smoke in addition to my treatment, and never before had I blacked out for an entire 3 days. I'm absolutely sure he put something in my drink. So this happened on Saturday. I, 29 and female, live in a fairly decent neighborhood. Not exactly the best, but definitely not one usually thought of as super dangerous either. Actually, it wasn't even that late at night. It was only like 9:30 p.m., and it was summer as well. It had only been dark for at most an hour or so. I had left my friend, taking transport back home, and since my friend had left in a rush, there was something I wanted to do that I felt I might forget once I'd actually arrived home. Someone had tried to take my phone out of my hands a few months ago though, so I was waiting until I was in a safer place to take it out. I turned a corner, and there was literally one more block to my house. It was a pretty narrow street. This seemed to be as safe a place as any. I started to pull my phone out when suddenly someone stumbled toward me. His words were quite slurred, so I didn't quite get what he said at first. It was dark as well. After a moment, I understood he seemed to be telling me to give him my phone or my wallet or something. I stared, and despite the darkness, I could see something in his hand. It looked very much like a gun. It may have been fake, but still, I was terrified. For some reason, I looked around. Not so far away, walking toward me, was another woman. I screamed for help and ran away from the man, all while bracing myself for the pain just in case the gun was not fake. The woman yelled at me to stop running and come inside the building closest to us, and she ushered me in. There, after having a bit of a panic attack, the woman told me there had been another man hiding behind a car nearby that I didn't see because I was so fixated on the other guy's possible gun. I don't know exactly what that was about other than grabbing my phone, but still, there's a possibility I may have lost more than just my cell phone if I decided to stick around. I've been debating about whether to share this or not, but I finally decided it's been long enough for me to talk about this. This happened to me and my mom a few months ago, back in October. It happened in a very rural part of New Hampshire, like a side road on a side road type of neighborhood. It was pouring out, as it had been raining for pretty much the entirety of the day. My mom had just gotten back from down the street in my sister's car. I was on the couch in the living room when I suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Our front door has a big glass pane on the front, so we could look out from the inside, and I guess people could look in from the outside as well. Through the window pane, I could see a man. I didn't really get a great look at him, as I didn't have my long-distance glasses on. The man, though, seemed to have noticed I'd seen him, and waved as if trying to be friendly. For the rest of this post, I'll refer to him as the Poncho Man. I got up and thought about opening the door to see what the man wanted, but I relented. I couldn't properly see who this was, and I didn't want to let a stranger into the house. Instead, I went down the hall to my parents' bedroom, where my mom was getting ready for work. She asked what was up, and I explained to her that a man in a poncho was waiting outside our door and seemed to want to talk to us. Instantly, she went as white as a ghost. Immediately, she stopped getting ready, closed and locked the bedroom door, and started checking the windows to make sure they were locked. I asked her what the hell was going on. My mom explained to me that as she was driving home earlier, she had actually seen the Poncho Man. He had just been standing there motionless in the rain on the side of the main street. As soon as my mom turned down our road, though, she saw him start to walk in the mirror, presumably to follow us. At the time, the encounter was weird, but she hadn't thought anything more of it. Why would someone be standing out there in the pouring rain on this random back road in the afternoon? It was like he was waiting for something. I started to panic as well. My mom called my aunt and asked what she should do. My aunt told her to call the police immediately, and so we did. We proceeded to pace around the bedroom, frantically looking out the windows to see if we could find the Poncho Man. From where the bedroom was angled, though, it was impossible to look at the front porch and see if he was still there. After what felt like hours, we finally saw a police car pull up. We carefully unlocked the door and went down to let the officer in. We explained what we'd seen, and he agreed to do a scan around the neighborhood. As he left, though, I noticed there was something left on the doorknob. I took it off. It seemed to be a political ad for a candidate running for office. At first, I thought it was possible the Poncho Man was just campaigning for said candidate, but then I found a lot of holes in that story. It was pouring out now, so why would he go door to door in that weather? And why would he take such an obscure route in such an off-the-beaten-path neighborhood? The houses were very far apart, so you'd barely make a dent campaigning in this area. The timing didn't make sense either. Sure, me and my mom were home, but it was 4 in the afternoon. Most people would still be at work. Eventually, the officer returned. He found the guy down the road and questioned him. The man claimed to ID himself and claimed he was a political campaigner and was just knocking on doors for that reason. When probed further though, conveniently enough, the man claimed he'd left the last ads at our house. That makes the campaign story even more absurd. Our house was right in the middle of the street. It's not like we were the last on the block. So why would you go down that street if you hadn't brought enough for the whole thing? Even the officer pointed this out to the man and said it was unusual behavior. The man fled soon after. Although the officer was suspicious of him, there wasn't really anything he could do about it. There was no way to prove the man's intent. He told us to be very alert and not hesitate to call if the Poncho Man returned. Fast forward a few weeks. I started noticing the officer's car seemed to be permanently stationed just down the road from us. I got curious and asked my mom about it. She said there had been multiple break-ins into the houses down the road, and now the officer was doing a sort of sting operation. The Poncho Man encounter and the break-ins may be unrelated, but considering how the man acted, I have a sinking feeling they're connected. Thankfully, for the past few months, we've seen neither hide nor hair of the Poncho Man. We got a new doorbell system with a camera, and the police left the area where they were doing the sting. I hope that means this whole situation is over, and we're done with and never have to meet that man again. I'd like to share my little story. My childhood best friend Marie and I were around 12 or 11 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a provincial park, about 2 hours from our hometown. We would spend the entire summer each year living in their camper out there. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still pretty bright out, but just beginning to lose the light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road, with about 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick brush as well. We were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front of or behind us. All of a sudden, though, we heard a sudden rustling and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then the sound of running footsteps soon followed. Marie glanced back and suddenly grabbed my arm, urging me under her breath not to look. At the same time, the running stopped. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her voice and chose to simply listen to my friend. We both started to panic, getting that feeling like when you're running up the stairs after turning the basement lights off. We picked up the speed as much as we could without breaking into a sprint, knowing the ice cream shop was only a minute walk away at this point. The path soon broke, and we arrived in the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steered me hard to the left, heading towards the lake and the boat rental area. Instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop, I went along with it silently, understanding ice cream was no longer the supreme interest right now. Marie was clearly panicking. We were both looking around, but it seemed whatever had scared her was nowhere to be seen at this point. Marie walked up to the boat rental and got us a kayak. We climbed in and paddled out into the middle of the lake. As we paddled there, she told me there had been a man behind us. The man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat, with the hood pulled over his face, despite it being the middle of July. She'd seen a terrible smirk upon his face, and swore that as he stopped running, she saw him put away something shiny into his coat pocket. He appeared to have just emerged out of the bushes immediately after we walked past them, given the sounds we heard right before he came running onto the path. We reached the center of the lake and stopped paddling. I pulled out my Nokia brick phone that my parents had, thank God, given me just in case. I handed it to Marie and told her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone began to ring, I saw her look out past me into the shore. She went pale, lifting a hand to point shakily at what she was seeing. I turned. There was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us, and watched him do 2 full laps around, never looking away from us. He waved before stepping back and disappearing into the woods. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family. We were freaking out so bad the whole time. As the sun got lower and lower, we did manage to have someone come with a truck. By the time we reached the shore, it was pretty dark outside. I don't really know what we would have done if I hadn't been able to call for a ride with my phone. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go to the ice cream shop, inform an adult there, and ask her parents to come get us then. But still, it worked out. We got back safe, and we thankfully never saw the man again. I was a utility locator, and I used to work on a team with my dad. To find a gas service from the gas main to the house, you must connect the equipment at the gas meter. Many older homes have the gas meter located in the basement. Sometimes I would be the one to connect the equipment, while my dad went out to find the gas service. On this particular day, we got to a house that had the meter stationed in the basement. I go up, knock on the door. The homeowner points me in the direction of the stairs to the basement. I go down and I can see the gas meter in the corner with 2 walls built around it, sort of making it like a closet with no door. Behind the gas meter was an old crawl space halfway up the cinder block wall. No lights at all in that space. As I stepped into this small closeted area, I heard what I could only describe as a demonic growl coming from behind the crawl space. I stepped out immediately and called my dad for backup. Not wanting to sound spooked myself, I only told him I needed a flashlight. He hung up and I stood outside the doorway and reached in to hook up the equipment. My dad came down the stairs with a flashlight. As he stepped through the door to see if I'd got it in the dark, that same demonic growl came from the crawl space. He just about knocked me down the stairs rushing to get back out of there. He handed me the flashlight and ran back outside. I stood there pointing it at the crawl space with a feeling that something was watching me. My dad called me and told me he was done working on this house now. I grabbed my equipment as quickly as possible and ran the fuck out of there. I never did find out what it was. I know for sure it didn't sound like a dog or a raccoon though, and I've never heard anything like that before or since. I had a veteran female Marine in my anatomy class that was having some problems with what she assumed was a stalker. She had a guy from a town about 40 minutes away come to set up her computer for her and debug it. The guy was bragging about how he was all ex-military intelligence, blah blah blah. She thought nothing of it at first. He got her computer set up and everything seemed to be fine. Mind you, she's a fairly attractive single woman and mother of 4. Her house was huge and had a pretty good alarm system installed, including a motion sensor camera. The alarm system also gave her updated lists of which doors had been opened and at what time. She was home alone one morning, getting ready for class, when she heard what she thought was a door slamming. She grabbed one of her firearms and loaded it, and checked the house only to find nothing. She left and set the alarm, and didn't think much of it. Must be just going nuts from stress or something. She left the house and then immediately got a notification on her phone that after she left, the alarm was deactivated and the front door had been opened and closed. She realized she had not just been hearing things. She called the police and the alarm company, but after they came and searched the house, they found nothing. Fast forward a week later, alarm was still acting up. The cops had been called a second time, and her neighbor helped her search the house as well. She asked me while in class to come home with her and search her house with a gun. I agreed. On the way there, the alarm was still being weird. We arrived to the house and loaded our firearms. We started downstairs and worked our way slowly up. As we arrived to the top floor, I asked her if she'd ever checked the attic. She was surprised and said no. My adrenaline started pumping immediately as we found the crawl space door up there. I climbed in first, not knowing what or who I'd find. We looked around with our flashlights, and we could see a set of footprints in the billowing insulation leading to a far corner with a blind spot. We walked over cautiously to check. No one was there. We climbed down from the attic and shut the door. She recognized that sound as the sound she'd heard that first morning when she was home alone. We went downstairs to chill out and wait for her kids to get home when I noticed the doggy door on her back door. I asked her if she locked it. I inspected it, only to find that this lock could be unlocked very easily, simply by sliding any key across the latch. The man had been entering and exiting her home through the dog door. We left immediately to go buy a new door and come back to install it. After leaving, she got an update that the doors from the garage into the house and out the back door had all been triggered in the meantime. They had been hiding in the garage the entire time while we were in the home. We installed a new door, and the problem ceased soon after. Scary shit. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.